welcome everybody and thank everybody for coming to this coffee from many countries, from many places around the world. This is our 6th virtual coffee for Confined Yogi. The vision for our virtual coffee is to create a global community of yogis looking to each other for wisdom in this uncertain time of global pandemic, wisdom to help us navigate the highs and lows of this global crisis. My hope is that by hearing voices from our senior Iyengar teachers from all over the world, we will learn different perspectives on how to refine our yoga tools. Together, we will explore how do we live our yoga and strengthen our sadhana, our practice in this period of uncertainty. It is together through practice and reflection that wisdom is created. So I'm very happy today that our guest speaker is Pixie Lillas from Sydney, Australia. Pixie started yoga in 1976 with Donna Holloman in Italy and then went to Pune to study with BKS Iyengar in 1977. She has returned since regularly to study with the Iyengars. She co-founded the Balmain Iyengar Yoga Studio in 1980, has been director ever since. She also founded Yoga Vashtu, an online Iyengar yoga studio. She has been associated with the Iyengar Association in Australia since its foundation in 1985. Pixie has run as well the assessment process for Australia through their association. She also teaches workshops yearly in Europe and in New Zealand. A fun fact about Pixie, that she was an interpreter in Italy and knows many languages. She has written extensively on yoga sadhana, and you can find her articles on her website. So without further ado, Pixie, would you let us know how you came to yoga and why did you stay?
I think, good morning, everyone. Good morning from me. Good afternoon for many of you. Look, I started, as you were saying, I started in '76 with Donna Holloman, and I started through my then partner, who was already Michael Hollingworth, who was already teaching with Donna in those early days. And we were mentioning before, there were a small group like Gabriela Jubilaro also coming, who's also going to be on one of these discussions soon. Look, I was interested. I'd done a lot of swimming. I was a physical person. I was living in Florence, which is a very urbanized place. I was trying to find things to do. I was working as an interpreter. I needed some body balance. And through Michael, I started to do some practice and went very early on. I was sort of lucky. I went to retreat with Donna within, I don't know, a month of starting yoga. And then a year later, I went to Pune. But I think, you know, the base of the question is, why did I start? I think a lot of people, we were mentioning before, you're looking for something. I think I needed a balance to my mental, you know, conference, interpreting, headphones, all of those things that come in that confined space and just working mentally as we do now with our computers. And through yoga, it just clicked. I don't know, I didn't have an idea about yoga. I didn't know anything really about it, except that when I started it, almost from the beginning, because I was then living with Michael, I practiced every day. And there was something about it that I didn't even question. And I, you know, in some ways it's maybe like meaning anything, it just stayed with me. And I haven't, since then, I think I've practiced almost pretty much every day, because it's just become so much a part of my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when did you meet BKS Iyengar? You said 1977. So how did it happen? What was your yoga journey in the Iyengar?
Yes. Well, we worked intensively with Donna because Michael was already teaching for her. We lived close to her, and we were a bit of a community that worked together in yoga. So I suppose we were working strongly. And Michael and I were the first people that Donna sent to the Institute. So that was '76, the Institute opened in '75. So it was early days, there were maybe 40 of us there at that time. I was there for a couple of months. And so that's when I had not met BKS. I had been in Europe, but I was still, you know, a little younger then. I wasn't one of the people chosen to go to his workshop at that time. But we went to India, and it it really was, we joked at the time when people were going to India, they say, oh, before photos and after photos, you know, it's such a transformative experience, but it was sort of really, you know, in jest, you won't be the same. But look, in many ways, I think that was true. It was a bit like a kind of volcano coming through. He was always such a big presence. And a few of us said over the times when you reflect back and think, you know, what was it? What is it that just connected us? And I think he just offered, without saying anything, through the yoga one did with him, one just saw change and the possibility of transformation. And I think that's something that has interested me the whole time in my teaching also. How do you open up for people the possibilities that we have within us? And that's mentally and physical. I also love Guruji's work of using the body to get to the mind, because the mind is such an elusive and, you know, a treacherous friend, he would call it. And, you know, you say quiet the mind and you think, well, how? You know, that's yes, be quiet. Now we have to be still. But we found tools. I think he just offered so many ways of exploring ourselves. And that just has never stopped. It just, you know, the doors keep opening. And I feel very grateful to him for that. I think, you know, that's why so many of us have stayed on with his method, because it just keeps, just when you think you've got somewhere, something else happens and it changes it again. And it's very much like life itself. It's you know, it's a mystery and it's always unfolding.
I see. So if I can ask you about the learning that you gathered from BKS Iyengar, from your years of study with him, what would you like to pass on? What is something that struck you so very strongly and you want to pass on to us, to your student, to what is that?
Look, I think his uncompromising side, which was difficult, but I think something about the unwavering commitment to something. I think that's certainly something he himself said. He was a simple man. He says, I wasn't anything particular. And really just through his own passion and work, so many things, you know, happened and changed for him, which he then communicated to us, his students. So I think something about the unwavering commitment. I like to delve down into things. I like to find the causes of things. I like to identify the problems when I see them, or when something arises. And I think that's something he certainly gave as a tool. So many things he said that I remember over the years, you know, that, you know, the asanas are vehicles for exploration, and just ways of, you know, he would just cut down, you know, does it take so long? Just, you know, he would ask of you, and you would find within that the possibility within yourself, things would just drop away, all that sort of noise, and he would just keep you so intensely focused. So I'm drawn to, in my work as an interpreter, you have to be very focused. I think I'm drawn to that. I like the sense that all the noise drops away and something he brought you absolutely in the moment. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that we are losing apart from this present time. But I think focus is hard, multitasking, trying to bring people back into themselves, all of us for ourselves. And I think the yoga through Guruji really gave that the ongoing possibilities of how to keep refining ourselves too, refining our intelligence. And every time you worked with him, something changed. And I think that I just continue to find that fascinating. I feel like I haven't even begun on the journey yet of delving a little deeper into the subject.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's interesting because I remember when my teacher would come back from Pune, they would say, we're doing it differently. And there was a feeling here. What do you mean we're doing it differently? So we were doing it this way and now we're doing it differently. And it took many years to understand that it's a life practice, right? That thing change. So the change that you have gotten from BKS Iyengar in your own teaching, what is it that you are going to be giving your students? What do you want to give your students?
Well, I think something along of what you were just saying now about people would come back and, you know, in a way it drove Iyengar's crazy, we would be so fixed on things. And, you know, Guruji, the very first time I was there, one of the things that had rattled me at, 25, 26, he said, the truth changes. And you're going, well, truth is truth. And, you're young and you're idealistic and you think, I've got to find the truth. And that was something big that changed my mind a little bit, or changed my mind a lot. So I think that sense of being able to look at, and we'll get to uncertainty as we continue on with this discussion, but that you can't hang on to things. And Abhijata gives this, talks about this time when she was working with Guruji with Marichasana 3, and he worked with her. And then the next day she came in very proudly, she was showing, and he said, what are you doing? And she said, oh, I'm doing what you taught me yesterday, Guruji. He said, that was yesterday's Marichasana. What's today's Marichasana 3? And, those sorts of, in a way, that sort of wisdom, which he, I think, didn't even really impart with us to try to, it was just something that came from him and from his practice. And I think one of the things that, you mentioned, sometimes I talk through asana, or I talk through practice a lot. And that's because I find it tells me so much. And it tells me things like that. And yesterday's whatever is not relevant today. You have to come with a fresh mind. Mm-hmm. So when we would come back from, I think, well, the thing that Pune did for us in that way, and studying with Guruji in particular, was not to be fixed and not to try to find the answer, because as we know with our bodies, and I know we'll get to that too, the body changes, but not just with age, but it changes from what we ate yesterday. It changes from what happened to us this morning. It changes how we sleep. And if we try to hold on to things, we're lost. I think we have to be able to stand every day quite presently and see what comes up.
So I want to segue into our topic of global crisis and uncertainty, because you just mentioned it. And I'd like to start by quoting you. You ask what changes with the passing of time, and you answer nothing, because practice is practice, and everything because your body may now place persistent obstacles in your path and new doubts arise. So I'd like to think about that in relation of what's happening now. So in this time of pandemic, our mind and maybe even our body may place persistent obstacles and new doubts may arise. How do we orient ourselves in this time? So, and can you talk about both of aging and both relating it to pandemic?
And they do relate quite closely together, and they tie in with the point of before, that everything changes. Yes. And I think one thing starting off with that is that we cannot control change. Mm-hmm. We cannot, have the certainty that we may like, and we know that, all of us in this particular time, and we know it as we age, because we don't know what the next day brings, health-wise, body-wise. That all changes. But the only thing we can really work on is ourselves. So, if we want to change a person, a situation, that's really not within our control, but we can look to ourselves, and we can try to get ourselves in a better state, a better frame of mind, in order to face what is in front of us. I think with the aging process, and, some of the people here will be younger than any of us, those as we go through. I mean, I certainly, when I was younger, it's very hard to envisage forwards, and you're not really even looking that far ahead when you're in your 20s. But when people talked about arthritis, or when, you just think, oh, it's a little bit of stiffness, not that much. And we realize as we get older that those things, all those older people that we saw in our youth who talked about, seemed to be a bit fixated on their bodies and what was going on, because they had problems. We didn't really understand it. And I think now, watching those changes, they occur. People will look and think that yoga is a miracle cure. We are not immortal, it's not a miracle cure, but it does give us tools to work with. So in my personal instance, as I've got older, I do have a lot of arthritis. I have some familial things from that. And that's perplexing. And it was, I think, as that change started to come, and I'll come to the pandemic as well with that, but I think it creates a lot of doubts. how did this happen? People, my students would go, not you, why is this happening to you? But you practice yoga, you'll never have these problems. And of course, none of us are immune. So there's the outward thing. And I think I mentioned that also in that particular article, that as yoga teachers, and even as practitioners, there's a sort of wanting to hide, and people expect you to be a certain way. And then, you know, you too have these problems. So how do you face those? And I've found with honesty is better. It's not a discussion we often have. And at first I also didn't, you know, I want to present a little better when I'm showing, when I'm teaching. And then just to be upfront and just to work with, it gives people, I have realized it gives people the freedom to also come with their problems, you know, and not to think that, oh, well, that's fine for that yoga teacher because she doesn't experience these things. I think as we facing, I like some of what that offers. Obviously, it depends on the day. Some days you're more philosophical and you think, you know, and you work with that better, and sometimes it can be frustrating. And I think that's interesting too. But I think working with a body that is changing shows us that there is a way, even when things are difficult. But that persistent commitment of Guruji's, I find getting on my mat helps me. Even a few years ago when I was having more problems with a hip and it was really getting in my way and things were painful, and it was just, but getting on the mat, I could always find some little bit of space, and it gave me a sense of certainty amongst the uncertainty of what was going to happen the next day. I think we mentioned a sense of control, but not in an over-controlled way, but a sense I can't change everything, but I can change how I'm working today. I can work with what I've got and see, is there anything I can do to improve that? And I find that useful in my life. I find it useful in teaching. Forget all the big things, we get anxious, but what can I do right this moment to make something a little bit more acceptable, to make something a little bit more tolerable even. Yeah. And when we get to, you know, the current situation, I think we've talked a little bit, and when the virus first came out, when it came in Australia too for us, I think there were so many different, the phase of it, people were asking us, many of you may have found, people were asking, what should I do for my immune system? Can you give me an immune sequence? You know, everyone was frightened of how to deal and how to best be in their physical health. But I actually found as I looked at it more, and when I was thinking, what can I offer my students also, and I was doing some online, some recorded classes, and I thought it was really the grief and the anxiety that was the main thing that first needed to be addressed, you know, and that sense of everything was changing. There was an underlying kind of quivering feeling of, you know, tremor inside, even when we were going about our lives before everything was even fully shut down. Not knowing what was ahead was scary. And then as things began to lock down, I think there was a lot of grief of not being able to do our normal things, not be able to see our families, not be able to travel. You know, in my case, much of my family is in Europe. And then there can be anger. There can be anger about, you see on the news all the time, people saying, I don't want to wear a mask. Why are you telling me to stay at home? There's a lot of anger, and we want to direct it at people. And if we can come back to ourselves, and if we can use, for me, I found the practice to actually find out, identify the problem. What am I feeling today? Is it anxious? Is it angry? Is it exhaustion? And then I can start to pick and choose and think, what of this tool of yoga practice, what can I use to actually help settle myself so I can face the day and I can go about doing what I need to do today and try to bring myself to a state of a little bit more evenness, equanimity.
Mm-hmm. So you said something really interesting to me about the space. Even when there is arthritis or there is any kind of problem that we have our body, or now with the pandemic, yoga always gives us a little bit of space, right? That space that we find, and that is maybe the space also of surrendering. There is a space of surrendering that can happen there, and that I'd like to hear what you have to think about that.
Yeah, I think when you say space, it's a word I use a lot even in teaching about finding space. So let me work through the body, which is part of, you know, our yoga practice, is to find, and I think that's what I find so fascinating with yoga is that, you know, Guruji would say also that the mind is so illusory, but the body is very tangible. So it gives us feedback when we're a little bit spinning out and we don't really know what's going on. So something about the stillness also that yoga practice brings. You start off a practice and you're feeling unsettled, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling worried, you're preoccupied. And I think bit by bit, by focusing on the back heel, on focusing on the elbow, on focusing on the chest, on focusing on something that you can see and that you can feel, starts to, you know, move away some of those other concerns until bit by bit I find it becomes like the noise starts to go and we start to go more internally and find space and find quietness. Space, you know, I was saying with arthritis, I find, you know, a phrase I sometimes use, it becomes like threading the needle. I can't do this, I can't do, not quite coming. But now I can actually move, now I can bend more, now I can work more freely. And I think that that then translates into finding some mental space as well. And Rahel has gone from my big screen, but and space is what gives us room to observe. When Guruji would say, and we would, you know, people, when we talk about practice and watching his practice, you know, Prashant once was pointing out that look at all the photos in the room, look at all the Lathan Yoga photos, and his face is in Shavasana, even when he's in Kapotasana or doing an extreme pose. So finding that, you know, I find if we can quieten our minds when we're doing the practice, and that comes through physical, the detail of softening the eyes and keeping the throat quiet as we practice, that gives me internal space, which allows me to see my body, which also then brings me to a little more clarity. So by the time I have entered into that point of practice, things drop away and I feel like I see more clearly. It's like taking the blinkers off. It's like wiping the screen down. Feels like everything becomes a little more clear. Yes. And it's, you know, working through the tangibility of the body and working with the difficulties and the tightnesses of the body starts to open things out.
I see. So in your paper on aging, you said that at some point you can go deeper in your practice as we age. So I want to put that in connection with what are the pandemic as an opportunity? What is it that we can also learn from this period?
So I think in terms, I think what we have found is most of us have found we have to review. And that's interesting too. As we get older, we tend to review, reflect, look at our lives in many ways. And as we get, you know, to those later ages, as I'm entering into as well, as to how do I want my life to be going forward? What choices will I make? How will I start to channel, you know, what I'm doing and where I'm heading? And I think in some ways the pandemic has done that for many of us as well, through the difficulty of it and all the, you know, tragedy of it in many ways too. I think it has made us all, stop. That's certainly true. Things cannot be as hectic in our everyday lives. And I think it's made for many of us think, what do I really want? How do I really want my life to be? What's important in my life? What are the things that I really want to focus on? Who are the people that I feel are important to keep close to me because we're not so hectic? And that's, that I think that's an important thing at any stage of our life, is to begin to be able to get a little bit clearer as what do I, in a conversation it's important. Right now it's important. What do I really want to say? What am I really trying to communicate? And in our lives right now, what is important? And I think we can get very distracted by so many things, and to stop for a moment and think about, what do I want to do? I think aging, time starts to be, I found myself at 50, and as you know, over the decades going, life is too short. Life is too short for this argument. Life is too short for this worry. Why am I bothering with this right now? And I think the pandemic has cut down some of those things too, where we just, where we really come back to the essentials. That is a positive from it. Maybe it's made us value things. It's made me think about things that I took for granted. The travel in order to be. I moved to Australia. My family's in Europe. Much of my family's in Europe, and I feel, I took for granted every year I will travel. I will go and see them. They will come and see me. That's come away, and that leaves some sadness and some difficulty, but it also makes me think, all right, how do we go forward with that? How can I still keep connection when we're far away?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a lot of sadness and grief, as you said at the beginning, that is coming with that, both with aging and both with the pandemic, in a sense.
The things we are brought to, that we have to let go of, and look, in many ways, and hopefully not for a little while, but you begin to come and you think, well, the ending of life, as you come, I'm turning 70 this year, and as you come to that, you begin to think, okay, so there's 10 years, there's, it's not endless in front, and that's sad, but it can be sad in the sense that it is sobering thought, and it makes, I think, feel about making the most of time and not wasting time. And that's, I guess, what I meant. Life is too short, and I find that being, that sense of getting on, having a yoga practice really keeps me clear, and it keeps me being able to see what it is, whether it's the sadness or what it is that's going on in that particular moment. Letting go, surrendering. We learn that in yoga. And what I like about yoga practice is that every day I get to practice the things that are hard to do physically. Right now, with a body that gets older, how do I work with that on that physical level? But it also gives me a chance to observe what's going on for me. And it's, there are big things going on in the world right now, and it can be depressing. It can be, that as well. So depression, how do I open up to life today? And, all the news that goes on. I mean, sometimes, all those things that we say is that don't listen to the news anymore, and yet we all have to listen and find out what happened in that part of the world, what's happening in America. And there can be, and that's good. We need to be informed, but how do we not let that overwhelm us at the same time? A balancing act. Every day is a bit of a balancing act. And with aging, you don't know either what tomorrow brings.
That's right. So that discussion on aging brings me to the importance of asana in the Iyengar yoga. So because Iyengar reminds us that there are 8 limbs of yoga, but he was a virtuoso of asana, right? We know him as a virtuoso of asana, and Prashant and all the other Iyengar try to remind us that basically there are 8 limbs to yoga, not only asana. But what is the place of asana in your practice these days in relation to the whole yoga system? So,
well, I would add pranayama in there too, because from early days, I've practiced pranayama, so asana and pranayama. And I think, I understand even other people who don't practice, the sense of why this focus on asana, why this focus on the body. Is it not time to, come more into another side? And they'll say the spiritual side or the mental side. And I find the thing with asana, firstly, asana changes. In the beginning, it is more, Guruji said himself, it was more gymnastics, doing things. And I've said at some point in one of those articles that I think what was interesting as a younger person is that it kept me focused while my mind was maturing. It gave me something good to do while my mind was growing up a little bit and developing. So that was one thing. And then at a certain point, it's like, I'm doing this practice. I'm doing the back bend, say, one day. But what's my breath doing? What are my eyes doing? Oh, well, that's very different. Like, that's a very different way of approaching it. What I'm trying to say is that it changed. It looks like asana. I often say in class, if someone walked by, they'd see you all in Tadasana or lying down in Shavasana, they think everyone's just not doing anything. But there's so much that we are seeing and exploring when we're doing Tadasana, we're doing Shavasana for that matter. So I think working through the body, and BK said this, he said it's a misunderstood fact. I think it is the way in to all the other limbs. And I think, and I'm speculating because I can only understand from what I was hearing from him, but it was that this tangible form is the thing that keeps us away from illusion. One of the early things I found when I was first studying yoga, and there were other systems of yoga, and they all have their own merits and values. But what I liked about this is that there could be no illusion. That Guruji stripped that away all the time. And so from that, I find the mind tells me all sorts of different things. When I'm depressed or when I'm angry or when I'm, any of those things when I'm anxious, you think that's not real somehow. But how do you begin to see that it's not the only thing that's going on, but how do I address that? And I find that if I can get into my body, as I was saying, it kind of wipes the screen down and I see more clearly. And that helps me, that brings change. One of the things I loved about yoga right from the start, I didn't know where it was taking me. And, we don't know where life is taking us, but I kept watching myself change. And the way I found of doing that was not to have an idea about things, but to get down and just observe. So it's like a creative art in some ways. It's like painting. And, I was saying the other day that the body is, using our body is like painting something on a canvas, and it gets you a chance to externalize what's going on inside. And through that, to bring back change. So I feel that all the other limbs of yoga, and maybe that is a part of, one of Guruji's teachings are explored through asana, but it's not asana. I don't even think asana is physical in some way. It looks physical, but I don't find that that's the attraction. Otherwise you could just go for a walk or do anything else, but it goes so deep that's what keeps me there, because it just, there is no end to it.
So maybe you are answering my question already by saying what you just said, but I am wondering, how do we manage as we age and also in this pandemic to stay open to change and channel all those illusions to the side?
I think it has to be not an idea, firstly. I think, I think even that, and of course, philosophical aspects in a way, they're so vast and they have to be brought down to something more simple. And in some ways, I think to be open to change is a good idea. And I have it, I would say I like that idea myself, but I think it's on a practical level, it's a day-by-day exercise. And I think what's sort of interesting is to notice when I'm not open to change. I think that's the other thing, to say whatever it is that I want to be, in general and on any particular day, how close am I and how far away am I? And that's interesting to see. It's not like, can I be open, but how open am I today? This open, to actually see the reality. And I think that's what I find is of interest to me, and what I, like to hope to facilitate in students as they come in teaching as well, is how to just see what actually is. See what is actually happening. And I think it helps me. Otherwise, the mountain's too big. you know. But if you see the mountain, you think it's this step and it's this step. Now I got here. How much more have I got to go? Or, oh, now I'm further than I thought. Or now I still have much more than I expected on that road.
Mm-hmm.
And so to keep it helps keep that centering and the clarity, and those are all words, focus. Those are all words that sort of resonate with me, or things that I find that I work with each day, is try to get some of that clarity. And that, perhaps, if we just stay within ourselves, helps us be open to change and not to try to. Uncertainty is not pleasant. I don't know how to plan for, we're used to having our calendars filled up. In 21, I'll be there in that month, and then I'm teaching here, and then I've got something else happening, and we can't do that. So we are being forced back to a day-by-day approach, and to just take things one step at a time.
Yeah, and it's
That's
very
difficult. I find that difficult, not to be able to plan, not to be able to look forward. But you asked before, what are the benefits of it? I think there are benefits, even though we come a little bit struggling to be made to come to that point. But you can only see exactly what's in front of you. And if we can appreciate that and work with that, and that gets us back to, to asana work. If I can be in whatever state my trikonasana is on that day. It's not about trikonasana, really, but it's about where are things, how are things with me right now, today. Whatever's going on in my mind, whatever's going in my body, I can be here in this instant.
So in this time, what is the relationship between your practice and your teaching? So has it changed?
In some ways, no, because I would say I've always been a person who, I think I try to communicate in teaching the experience that I have in my practice. And that, I think what changes with teaching over the years is I think we get better at sifting, these are beginners, these are more experienced people. And it's a different communication. It's a different conversation in a way that you have with different levels of students. And I think I like that I like the beginner starting to feel the awakening and people becoming interested and engaged. And it's nice to teach. I have some more experienced level students that I've been working with for many years, and I can kind of just be who I am and speak very, very openly with them, I suppose, in that practice. I've always been a person that whenever I teach, even if I have an early morning class, I practice before I teach, and I don't know what I'm going to teach. Maybe it's going to be standing poses, but I wait to feel a little bit, some little spark or connection, and that's what I take to my class that day. So it is very close for me. That, of course, even now that some things are more difficult to practice, I think often there is a little clue in that I may not be able to, fill out as much in a full bakasana. I still do bakasana, but it's not quite as raised and open perhaps. But that's not really the point. I think I find some point of entrance into that pose, whether it's a complicated pose or it's, Adho Mukha Svanasana, it doesn't really matter. I think that's every day. It's what keeps teaching alive for me, is that it has to be very real on the day and very, in that sense, personalized. And I try to bring something of that to the class on that day. So closely connected, those two for me.
So you mentioned, and you just talked a little bit about advancing. So do we always want to advance ourselves in yoga, or do we always want, what is it that we want when we do a yoga practice?
Good question. When you say that, what I feel is, for me, advancement is going deeper. Yeah. So it's not going higher, in some ways. And I think, I remember, and many of you know, many of you all will know who Patricia and her amazing backbend practice. I mean, in lots of practice, but her backbends are so known. When we were at the backbend intensive, Guruji took Geetaji, who was still already had trouble with her body, and she was not so expansive and open in her body, and Patricia, who has that amazing opening, and he took the two of them side by side, and Patricia was used to this. Guruji would work with her this way, but he was saying, you see these two poses now, Patricia will look bigger and more inspiring in some ways. But he said, look at the shape and the harmony in Geetaji. And so it was good to kind of watch. It's not always, not that, so it wasn't a comparison that Patricia's was bad. All I'm saying is that what is to look deeper often, and to look at the inequality that comes in the pose, and to look at the shape, and it may be lower, it may be less, but there is a certain harmony that was expressed in that sense. And so I think we're not really aiming, I certainly know it's not, it's not so much the photogenic or the expansiveness, but it's more about the quality. It's more about that inner quality. And when I see on magazines, you see these poses, I don't know, I call them the magazine poses sometimes, the young, flexible person who may be able to be bendy, and that has its merits, and especially, at that younger age, that's how we are. But often you see that there's no harmony and there's no inner balance to that pose. And it's what that person is doing at the time. But your eyes start to change, I think, when you practice more. So achieving more is more about finding an internal quality, whatever ability you have, and, and that will, go up and down. But whatever that ability is, it's more about the quality, and seeing that, and trying to get other, new teachers to see that, and try to, as practitioners, to see. And so I mean, I like your question, what are we aiming at? I think that's what we're aiming at. And it's a bit rough at first, and it's external, and gradually it gets in where you look at something and you go, that's amazing. When you look at it, it's not external, but there's some quality. You go to a dance or a music, concert, and something really moves you, and it's because there's something about it that's just perfect in that moment. But it's not something even that you can describe, because it's not so much external. It's just something that resonates with you. And I think maybe that's what we're aiming at, how to kind of meet ourselves and get some of that inner quality to come out through our practice. And that really doesn't matter what age we are, I don't think, what external ability we have.
And in this time, so again, comparing it to aging and to what's happening now, in this time of uncertainty and of difficulties all around the globe, what would mean to be actually full in a yogic sense? What would it mean to be full in a yogic sense?
I think some sense, some sense of, peacefulness and serenity inside is what makes me feel full. And I think that's because, if I reflect for myself, it's because it allows me, I'll get back to the word of clarity. Sometimes you're it's a bit of a cliche, you're in a beautiful place and you just can't see it, you just can't feel it. You're just not really there. And then some other time you just walk in, you sit, and just everything is, is glorious. You're very present in that moment. And I think that if we can get quiet, if we can get more, a little bit more serene and peaceful and balanced inside, it allows us to see the beauty that is there. And that perhaps brings some sense of that, of the fullness, of appreciation of what we have. The things, again, the things we can be grateful for, we're not really feeling that if we're feeling, unstable. We can't even, you don't appreciate what's in front of you. And I think that is something that this time and aging brings, and that this time of difficulty brings, is maybe really wanting to appreciate what we have. at any time. And sometimes that's bigger, lots of things. And so like a child, you know, they, you know, lots of toys. And then sometimes they find one toy is just everything that they want. And maybe we need to be able to be satisfied with the one toy and really, really play with that a little bit more fully.
Mm-hmm. So before I open it, I will open it to ask a question. I'd like to, I know that you have been a trainer of teachers in Australia. So what do you expect will change or already change? And what are the long-term implications of distance learning? Because we are all now in a new world with that distance learning. And so how is it that you expect things to change? And how will practitioners interested in becoming teachers become teachers?
I think it is a hard one. I think it's something we are all grappling with at the moment. We've talked a little bit about, you know, the benefits and how this world of, you know, screens and Zoom meetings and Zoom classes has expanded our possibility to be able to meet with people all over the world. And I think that's a wonderful thing to really appreciate and to be able to embrace as well. But I don't know how we can I don't know how we can do without the close contact, the face-to-face contact, where we really are able to, maybe we'll get better, and maybe the communication will change even through the screen. But I do think there's a reality that we can't replace between that being face-to-face. So I think perhaps we'll have to share that a bit. So when we can meet, either we will have to, if we really can't travel and be around, and move too freely, we may have to have each of us work less globally and work more with our local community. And that often is still a possibility, as with smaller groups, and ironically go back to the very early days when there were 1 or 2, 3, 4, you know, people that were being mentored and that worked closely with a teacher. Perhaps though, what we do have now with the computer and the screen possibilities is that we can expand that, where we can have a bit of one thing and then we can build on that with, you know, through distance, and then we see that we can come close back together again in a more face-to-face. I can't see how we can do without some of that close contact, because I think there are non-verbal things that get transmitted when we're together. I think there's a sort of energy, we talked about it earlier, you know, you teach a class and you come away uplifted and your energy is good and it's high, it's full. But I think through the screen that there's a little bit of, you know, that diminishes somewhat. So I think I would like to see at least a balancing of it. I'm not yet rushing to just embrace the, you know, the online classes, but I think they are an adjunct. I think they can definitely be useful, and they're great tools. Like now we can look up everything, we can read, any question we have, we can find out. When we first started, you know, there were a couple of books. There was Light on Yoga, was not even Gem for Women yet. Now for our students, you know, there are so many books and so many YouTubes and so many online things that they can look at. That can get confusing too. So I think I'll get back to, I think we need to still keep it simple, but expand where we can and make use of this, you know, great tool that's allowed us even to do what we're doing today, to open up our conversations where we can. But I do feel maybe things will just come a little bit more into smaller groups, and then the expansiveness will happen from small group to small group rather than the big workshops that we used to do. We'll see where that goes.
Thank you. So I think I'm going to open, we have another 10, 20 minutes. So I'm going to open it to the audience. Do we have any question for Pixie? Any questions?
And if you want, you can raise your virtual hand by going to the little 3 dots by your name, or it says more and there's a raised hand and we can see it that way, or just type it in, or just speak up.
Unmute yourself and speak up.
Yep.
Okay, so if we don't have another questions, maybe question will come in a minute.
We had a couple, Rahel, from the questions that people submitted. Maybe maybe one of them about, for Pixie, where do you look for inspiration in your own practice sessions? From Linda.
Yeah, thank you. These days, I think the inspiration really kind of has to come on my mat, and I don't often know at what point that's going to click in. So that's one thing. I think that's my everyday practice. I get up and I wait to see, and sometimes it comes quickly, and sometimes it's not till a third of the way through, and I think, there it is. Now I kind of know exactly where I am. But I think on that, look, I continue. I'm working with Guruji and Gita too, but I think Guruji, who was just so much my first impact and was so transformative for me, I still can hear his lessons. I will go back and read things. I will go back and see some of the things that are still available, some of the videos, and work with that. I think inspiration these days comes from all sorts of places, and it comes from something I've seen or I've read or I've heard or I've conversation I've had, and I think those things get back and get sort of distilled, and they come down onto the mat, and then from the mat they go back out in some ways. So it's almost like the mat for me is sort of a processing zone where either things appear there, or that's where I go and explore things a little bit further. And that's the body, as well as, I suppose, as to what my mental thing is going to be. It brings, so inspiration comes from lots of places, but I suppose on a strict yoga place, it will come from a spark from something I read, or something that some old things I go through, or something I've seen, something often from Guruji, but I would say it can come from dance and from music as well, something that inspires me. That's more about a feeling that then comes back onto my mat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Liz, do you have another question that you have from the online?
Do you want me to read that one from Sarah?
Yes.
Yep. So Sarah Angelasto from Virginia asked, what is going on with the pandemic in Australia, and how has it affected the yoga community there?
We have been a bit up and down. We were quite lucky originally. It seemed to be expanding, and we went into lockdown everywhere, and for about 5 or 6 weeks, and then things really settled and people started to relax more. So we closed down our schools. All of us closed down our schools. I was pretty early on to do that. I wanted to be preemptive and also keep everyone safe. You don't want anything to go wrong in a yoga class either, for the community, so to stay safe. And then we opened up again about 4 weeks ago, and now again, some of the places. So in Australia, there are different states, and there are borders in the states. So borders between states have been closed down again, especially those that are called the hotspots. Some have some open borders, but that's closing down again. So as far as the yoga community is concerned, I now am not, we're not doing any prop sharing. So people are now, and it's a little bit of a hassle. People used to, I say, look, there are all those blankets, all those bolsters back there begging to be used, but right now we won't use them. So we ask people to bring basic equipment, what they can. If they can bring some blankets, great. Otherwise we make do with less. Go back to sort of older days when we had less equipment. There are compromises in that, but I think at the moment, so we have little dots on the floor where people can put up their mats. We have certain amount of, we have a cap of 20. In my school I can fit maximum 18 with social distancing with 2 square meters, and we just don't share equipment. And I just, we send emails out about that, and people have been, I think, pretty good and pretty accepting with that. And we're getting back to the uncertainty. We're just thinking, oh no, we're going to have to close down again just when we reopen. And people are quite excited about being back in classes. But I think people are learning to be, well, while the classes are on, we're there, we will compromise, and everyone comes with their mat and their bit of equipment, and then we'll see where that goes. So we do have, we do have restrictions. And in Victoria, where Melbourne is, that's completely closed down again. They're in full lockdown again. So everyone there has had to close their schools.
Thank you for that. Is there any, and Jerry Crowley has a question. Jerry?
Yes. Hi, Pixie, and thank you so much
Jerry.
for meeting with us. It's so nice of you to share knowledge with us and your wisdom. My question is, as a teacher, the new levels in the system that is all changing, and I feel that there's good and then also some sadness, as already being in the system now for 20 years. And not really beginning my teacher training till 10 years of being a student. I feel like, what is your opinion of this? Do you feel like the Iyengars are trying to slow us all down a little bit so that we can have more time to develop this sensitivity and this inner feeling instead of just racing up the levels? I feel like over the years, I'm such a different person now, as a student, as a practitioner, and as a teacher than I was when I first started. So there is wisdom that comes from practice. I
agree a lot with that last part of the sentence. And then I think, with what you're saying, and I think it's really just, it's the changes that occur as we go forward, and we can't envisage them when we first start out. We don't know what sort of person we're going to end up being, and we just keep going forward. And practice, it does really bring a lot of that change. I think as far as I don't know whether, look, it's, there's still a little bit of up and down about the new guidelines and the new thoughts, and, there would be a lot of different opinions around that. But I don't know that in some ways they're saying they want to simplify it. In some ways it feels like they're speeding it up a little bit. I mean, I know the levels, when I first started, we didn't have, there was just junior, intermediate. There were levels, but there was only certificate at junior 3, at senior 3. You didn't get certificates at junior 1 and junior 2, for example. So that's the way I started. We thought that worked really well. You had a kind of building development process, and then at junior 3, for example, then you got your certificate, and as you work towards it. So in a way, that change doesn't, in some ways it simplifies, not so many assessments.
Right.
I think that's okay. I think that can work well. In a way, things seem to be speeding up. The level, how long you have to wait before you can present for assessment is less. So I'm not sure whether that's the aim. I think perhaps they're trying to address some problems that they see that have arisen through certification. Those of us who've been around a really long time feel that, there could be different ways perhaps of addressing those problems, but I guess we will see where all that gets to. I mean, I think a little bit of sadness, I think people do feel, because there are many people who've been, I've been in this, since the beginning of certification, but I know that many people that I've worked with and have worked with me have, they've finally got to this point now where they think, I'm really at a good stage now, and it feels like I've understood where things are, and now that sort of rug's been pulled out a little bit. So back to uncertainty and back to change. Kind of interesting that all these things are happening at the same time.
Yeah.
We live in interesting times. I think we'll see where that gets to, but perhaps there will be a little community discussion still to be had around how that development takes place. Yeah. I think there's a big worldwide community, and I think there are a lot of different opinions still about how best to refine this process. I don't know if it's, I think we're still a bit like a pandemic. We're still in the midst of flux, so it's a bit hard to have too much more to say about that, except that I don't know. I don't know that it's a slowing down process. I think that already was in some ways, I think some people would have complained that it was too slow. It was too laborious to go through the different ranks. As a person having been involved with that for a long time, it did have its merits because the structure was very clear. I think anyone can get to the next stage if they apply themselves, and it was a pretty clear pathway forwards. And I think we're all trying to make a little bit of sense about how this next phase goes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Pixie, could you mention your classes? Where are you teaching online? If people want to take your classes online, are you?
So what I have at the moment, the way I've worked it is, apart from the face-to-face classes that are working at the moment, I haven't done Zoom classes, but I do have, we may do some streaming if we get closed down. I have you were mentioning before, I have a online website called Yoga Vastu. And what I do with that is I have a whole lot of things. I have some classes that are filmed live on that, and I have a whole lot of teaching sequences that I've done on that. So really that's what I've been doing during closing down. It's been up for about 1.5 years now. I keep adding, and there are different levels, all different levels that people can do through that. So that's what I've been doing. And even now that I'm back to kind of real face-to-face teaching, I'm recording, I'm doing some filmed classes. So it's meant to be, it is a good way if you want to do, there are some kind of real classes there, as well as some recorded me going through sequences, teaching poses as I work through them. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. If we get locked down again, if that were to happen here in New South Wales where I live, I will probably this time open up to some sort of live streaming. But sort of what I've done is like a live class, except I don't have people in front of me. So it's the Yoga Vastu. You can have a look, and if there are questions about that, people can just email me directly as well. I'm happy to answer any of that.
Mm-hmm. So Pixie, before we close, I want to ask you if you would like to share something that you would like, what else you would like to share that you didn't have a chance to talk about in this conversation. Is there anything you would like to tell us?
Look, I know, I suppose mainly just for me, just when there's uncertainty and the question about, levels and the things that we've been talking about, and there are a lot of people in disarray at the moment, in our associations, to be honest, as well. People uncertain, Guruji's gone, Gitaji's gone, it's sort of a new era. And that's created a lot of, for some excitement, a lot of change, some distress, some sadness. We don't really know where that's going. And I think I was saying to someone in a meeting the other day, it was actually something different, it was about ethics committee, but it was a bit like, how do we keep our community together? How do we keep Iyengar yoga going? And I feel that's let's not drop the ball now, is what I feel. Let's not drop this now. This is such an important time. It's been such an important, tool and vehicle for me, and such a, so strong and such a big part of my life, such a friend to me throughout my whole life, through all the ups and downs. And I think that's what I try to transmit to students. This is such a good thing to have in your life. I don't know how I would go through life without it, really. It's such a foundation for me. I'll use that expression, let's not drop the ball now. Let's keep practicing. Let's keep steady. There's the world out there of the virus. There's the world out there of change in Iyengar yoga. There are, how relevant is Iyengar yoga with all the hundreds of other sorts of yoga types out there. I just think let's stay steady. Let's stay clear. Let's stay on our mat. And that can be a little bit symbolic for, the sense of just staying with ourselves and moving forward from that as much as we can, a very clear and steady place. This is not a time for being scattered. This is a time for really coming in back to our center. And I think we have, thank you to Guruji, I think we've got a great tool that we have been given, and let's keep working with it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, dear Pixie.
For inviting me. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for your wisdom, all the story, the insight, the wisdom that you have shared with us. And thank you for the audience that came from many countries. And I really think that it's together that we face adversity. So that's why we created those coffee, so that we can hear from different senior teachers. And I want to thank the Iyengar Association of New England and Artemis Yoga for their support. You need a community to be able to create in this world. And we need to remember that we are all interconnected. And it is in our interconnection that creativity and healing can flourish in this time, and certainly in this time. And as you said, the steadiness of our practice is so important. So we have done this virtual coffee since we have been confined here in the States since April, and you can find them on YouTube. Some of them are on YouTube on the channel. And I am pleased also to announce that our next guest speaker will come from France. Christian Pisano will be speaking to us on August 16 at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And on September 6th, Gabriella Gibiliaro will be coming from Italy as well at 1 o'clock. So I'm so happy that we're continuing doing these and that we are learning from each other. And I really want to thank you so much, Pixie, and for the audience, because I think this is really important for us to
It's a great undertaking. Thanks, Rahel, for inviting me, and thanks to everyone who was here today.
Okay,
We'll see you all soon in one form or another. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.